How's baby doing?
She's doing good. She loves music, so she'll start singing.
Oh, that's so cute.
I'm
That's
gonna let people in.
all right.
Welcome. So happy to see all these lovely faces. I just wanted to introduce our speaker. First of all, I'm Salome. I'm the president of the Washington State Society for Clinical Social Work, and I'm so grateful to have all of you here today. If you notice in the chat box, there is a sign in, sign out form, as well as an evaluation form. And so if you'd like to receive CEUs, if you could please be so kind as to just complete those forms. And without further ado, our speaker for today is Zainab. She is a therapist at Catalyst Counseling located in Woodinville, Washington. She graduated from the Pennsylvania State University with a Master's of Arts in Applied Clinical Psychology. Her research areas include refugees, trauma, as well as multicultural counseling practices. As an Arab Muslim, she is passionate about providing competent therapy to multicultural Arab and Muslim clients. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for the introduction. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. All right. Can everyone see it? Just a thumbs up. You can see it? Okay. All right. Perfect. So before we begin, feel free to have any of your questions in the chat box, or honestly, you can just go ahead and say the question. I'm pretty chill with that. So today I'll be presenting on counseling Muslims, some tips on providing culturally informed treatment. So just a land acknowledgement before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. So this is just quickly what we will be going over today. So I'll do a quick brief on what is Islam, talk to you more about the Muslim population in the United States, what does that look like, as well as the view of mental health in Muslim populations. We will then discuss something called MCO, or multicultural orientation, which is a very interesting kind of theoretical orientation. And the last thing we will be discussing is microaggressions in therapy, for which we will do a quick activity. So at that portion, I will ask people to either, talk in the chat box, have their cameras on, whatever works best for you, but we will be having a really small discussion. All right, so about me. Who am I? I am Arab or Arab. I'm North African. Sorry, excuse me. I'm a cisgendered female. I'm able-bodied and neurotypical. I'm Muslim. I'm an immigrant, and I'm bilingual. I'm also financially secure. So I just want you to take a moment, think about it, and send it in the chat box. How are you guys showing up today? What are you showing up with? I keep hearing the sounds. So quickly in the chat box, how are we showing up? All right, with curiosity. Thank you, Ellen. Think about Lacey, East Indian, cisgendered female. All right, so think about your identities, how you show up. As I wrote these down, how does that, make a difference? An older white guy. All right, Bill, thank you. All right, white, gender, female, able-bodied, neurotypical, spiritual, non-religious, and financially secure. All right, okay. So just a quick disclaimer, this presentation is just based on my own personal experiences as well as research, but it does not speak for the Muslim community as a whole. The community is so diverse, it's so multifaceted, and it's often heavily influenced by culture. So this does not speak for, the whole Muslim community in the US. It's just my humble kind of presentation. Another disclaimer, so we're currently in the month of Ramadan. Does anyone know what Ramadan is? Okay, so Ramadan is a month for Muslims where they fast from dusk to dawn. So around 5 a.m. in Seattle until 8 p.m., you don't eat food, you don't drink water, but it's also a month of a lot of kind of community and getting together, increased prayer, spirituality. So we're currently in it, and that's my humble kind of decorations at home. You can kind of consider it like the Christmas of Muslims. So if I'm a bit, unable to speak a lot today, it's probably because I really need to drink water, but that's okay. All right, so let's start with this. What is Islam? Show a quick video. Let's see, what are your reactions to it?
What's the weirdest thing you've been asked about being Muslim?
Can you hear the audio?
Do I worship a moon god?
Are you allowed to have sex during Ramadan?
I bet you like to hump goats. I don't even know what to say to that.
What's a mosque?
What do you guys really do in there?
The weirdest question is if I'm planning to blow anything up.
Why are you guys like that?
Why don't Muslims denounce terrorism?
Aren't you hot?
Are you circumcised?
I do denounce terrorism.
Really? You guys can laugh? You guys can smile? Oh.
A Muslim is a great many things, depending on your perspective.
Muslim is the word we use to label people that follow the Islamic religion.
And believes in the oneness of God.
And that Muhammad is his messenger.
That's really all that it is. There's no secret handshake. You don't have to run through a gauntlet.
Things like not cheating, not stealing, not killing, not hurting folks are principal to the faith.
We can't eat pork. There's no pork on my fork, no swine on my mind.
A practicing Muslim prays 5 times a day.
I'm not jiggy with the piggy. I'm not aching for the bacon.
Every chapter in Quran except one starts with God is merciful, God is compassionate. Compassion, mercy, these were the two concepts.
I'm not hostage to the sausage. There's a lot of these phrases.
I think the question of what is a Muslim 100% cannot be answered. We're talking about over 1 billion people.
People think a Muslim is traditionally basically someone looks like me with a beard, maybe not as much swag because that's unique to me, but Muslims come from all different walks of life.
A Muslim is anyone who says he's a Muslim.
There's all levels of Muslims.
That includes, you know, the secular Muslim who eats BLTs and washes it down with a glass of Pinot.
There are some that are very devout and practicing, and there are some that are not, just like with every other faith.
Nobody in Islam gets to say who is and who is not a Muslim.
God is the one who determines that.
We don't have a Muslim pope, although it'd be cool if we did, and I think it should be me.
If you really want to break down the Arabic word, it literally means the one who submits to God.
To peace.
According to my father, a Muslim is any person who surrenders to a force greater than himself. When I introduced my atheist, whitey white, infidel boyfriend to my dad goes, listen, Zahra, the word Muslim just means one who surrenders to a force greater than himself. That's it. Does he believe in gravity? So he surrenders to the gravity. It is a force greater than himself. He's a Muslim, so welcome.
A great majority of us are just ordinary, boring people.
You know, schmucks like us.
But what do I know? I'm just one Muslim out of 1.7 billion Muslims.
All right, so this is just like a really quick, fun video of showing you different perspectives of Muslims, and then at the end saying that there's a really big population in the world, which is 1.7 billion.
What's the weirdest thing
Sorry about that. So what is Islam really quick? Islam is an Arabic word which means surrender, submission, commitment, and peace. Thus, it can be defined as the path to attain complete peace through voluntary submission to divine will. So a lot of people hear the word Allah and they're like, Allah, what does that mean? This is just the Arabic word for God. That's it. No other meanings, nothing else. It's just God translated into Arabic. It means Allah. And Islam is actually the third largest religion in the US after Christianity and Judaism. So you can kind of see how there's really a lot of folks around, especially in a lot of diverse areas. So step 2, Muslims in the US. I want us to kind of show the diversity of Muslims in the US to understand how, discuss whether, okay, I will do that, Alan, thank you. About Muslims in the US to just know how diverse they are. So I'm gonna show you a small part of a video. I have some things I don't agree with in the video, but I want to show it to you and I want you to feel your reactions, see how you're reacting to it and type it out in the chat box, all right?
You know what I freaking hate? This. This is a beautifully crafted and measured lie. They get you from really early on. Now this right here is how they want the whole world to view us. Watch this.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stereotype world. Stereotype world, stereotype world. Welcome everybody to the stereotype world. I am the man, and this is my woman.
I always walk behind and stay low.
Shh, quiet! We live in sandcastles and always ride camels, even on our way to school.
Yes, I am the best, just like how you guessed. I don't get a say in what I do.
And I have 10 wives, then I bomb on my life, then I go to eat
Anything for Habibi.
Stereotype world, stereotype world. Welcome everybody to the stereotype world.
That's enough. It's about time that we speak up for ourselves. I think I need the mic. I need the mic. Come on. Pass the microphone, let me speak up and vent. The Middle East girls came down to represent. So yalla, 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 yalla. Let's put an end to all the stereotypes, inshallah.
So the video is really long, but it's very interesting to see. But I'm wondering, what are your initial reactions to the parts you saw? What did you think? Speak up, feel free, type in the chat box, whatever you prefer.
I'll say that it made me smile. Like just seeing folks who are fully covered, and I don't know if that's the right term or not, but they're covered except for their faces, and using wrap, which is kind of it's breaking a stereotype right there, because there's such a stereotypical association of wrap being with people who are scantily clad. And then of course this scene that you paused it on, those aren't young folks. It looks like there's some older folks and who are also doing some of the movements and be included in part of the wrap. So that makes me smile.
I feel that. Thank you so much for sharing. Natalie, awesome and joyful way to call out some very painful experiences. Women empowerment in the second one. All right. Any other comments, reactions? All right, so feel free to, okay, the first part feels so, for lack of better words, stereotypical and limiting, not easy. There's so much dimension to the second part, much more rich and engaging. Thank you for sharing. There's actually like a really long song after it that shows you different parts of different places, so it's really cool to see. But one thing is that this video is talking about people from Arab countries, or quote unquote Middle East. Though Muslims in the US are actually not majority from Arab countries. Muslims in the US come from so many different places that this is not the main thing. But it's important to understand how those stereotypical kind of ways manifest, and how usually for people who don't have too much experience with Muslims, this is the first thing they will see, that initial stereotype world. So I just thought it's fun to see. But with that said,
You know what
what do Muslims in the US look like? So there's actually 3.45 million Muslims in the US, which is a huge number. American Muslims are one of the most diverse religious groups, and they constitute of 25% Black, 24% white, 18% Asian, 18% Arab, 7% mixed race, and 5% Hispanic. So you can see how really, really diverse it is. There's actually no single country as origin for more than 15% of foreign-born Muslims in the US. So that shows you how Muslims can be so many different things. They don't have to look like me, they don't have to look like someone else. We're so different, we come from so many different places, which talks about how Arab is not equal to Muslim. So this sentence right here, sometimes people think that if you're Arab, you're Muslim. That's actually not true, because there is a big Orthodox Christian population in different Arab countries, such as Lebanon, Egypt. And just because you're Muslim doesn't mean you're Arab. So if you're meeting a Muslim client, assuming that they're going to be Arab is probably not. And with my experience, I actually have a lot of different diverse Muslim clients, including white clients who are converts, South Asian clients, and some Arab clients. All right, so Muslim Americans experience a lot of really difficult things in the US, unfortunately. So there is reports of physical threats, verbal abuse, and racial profiling. And they've also experienced harassment on college campuses, the defacing and vandalism of mosques, and racial profiling in airports and communities. Even if we think that Washington or Seattle area is really diverse, I think there have been like 4 recent acts of trying to burn down mosques in the area, which shows how even in the really, really big diverse communities, it still exists, and that Islamophobia still exists, and that fear of Muslims still exists. So since the tragic events of 9/11, there has been an increased focus on the war of terror. American Muslims have experienced prejudice, stereotyping, discrimination, and stigmatization. One of the biggest thing is increased airport security. For example, I always get randomly checked. TSA, you know, always happens. When I go with my brother who doesn't look Muslim, he can pass for, I don't know, Hispanic, something else. If he's alone, he doesn't get checked. If I'm with him, he does. So you can kind of see the link there. So the rise of Islamophobia brought about negative health outcomes and health disparities. And actually 75% of Muslim American adults believe that there is a lot of discrimination towards Muslims in the US, with 50% stating that there has been an increase in the difficulty of being Muslim. So as we're talking about this, I want you to think about how their backgrounds, how their experiences are contributing to the different problems they might bring about in therapy. How, yes, there's a lot to do with depression, anxiety, but the bigger societal aspect, those things they're facing and how they're affecting their status. All right, what are some misconceptions on mental health in the Muslim community? The reason why I want to talk to you about that is because if you have the background of how more traditional Muslim communities have a view of mental health, it might be easier when you're working with them to have that information. So the first thing, mental health is actually a taboo subject in a lot of more traditional Muslim communities. So it being a taboo leads to the fear for the members of community who do have the mental illnesses. So it's two things. The one thing is they're actually afraid of people with mental illnesses just because they don't understand what that means. And they fear for people who have them because they're worried that they're not going to thrive in the community. And this leads it to be more of a hush-hush situation where, if you're going to therapy, you can't tell anyone, you should be secretive about it. Thankfully, there has been a trend where people are more open and it's much more accepted. So like in different younger millennials, Gen Zs, people are so open about it and they're like, oh, I went to my therapist today, but it still exists in older generation. And that still seeps into how people parent their children, teenagers, etc. The second thing is the idea of being non-religious. So a lot of people who present with mental health concerns are being told, oh, this is just because you're not close to God. Like if you read the Quran, which is the book, or if you're struggling, then you're not close enough. All you need to do is, get closer to your faith and do better, and all your problems are going to be solved. So there's no reason why you should go to therapy. So that's one thing that's actually told a lot, where people suffer with, let's say, depression. They're like, oh yeah, no, they're just not close enough, just make them go to a couple of spiritual classes or to the mosque and they'll be fine. And it has been better, where actually I see a lot of parents taking their teenagers to therapy, but it still really exists and it really heavily influences a lot of people. The third thing is seeing mental health struggles as a test from God. So it's the idea that this is just God testing me and I need to be able to withstand what's going on. So I'm not going to go to therapy. It's just a test. I need to bypass and that's it. And they do not acknowledge that there needs to be other solutions to what's going on. The fourth thing is something that isn't really a misconception. I believe there's some trueness to it, but it's important to acknowledge. It's the idea that a non-Muslim therapist will impose their beliefs on you, which a lot of Muslim clients have actually experienced. First, it's the idea that psychology is a Western-rooted practice and that a white therapist will not understand where you're coming from. They're not understand your spirituality. And they'll be like, oh, you should just put this aside. You shouldn't care about this. And they will try to impose your beliefs. It could be a misconception at times, but unfortunately, I do know from experiences with people I know that seeing white therapists, either the therapist will be like, okay, we should not talk about that because they're afraid to talk about religion, or they will be like, wow, this actually happened. And they will make it look like what you're going through based on your cultural or religious practices. It's so different and it's so othered that it makes you afraid to speak about specific things. So that is one thing that is stopping people. The last thing is, based on all of this, there is a lot of shame with mental health practices. Due to stigma, the idea of disclosing mental illnesses or just struggling with mental health includes concerns with family, social standing, and marriage. And the marriage part actually does still happen, where let's say a woman is looking to get married, and let's say she goes to therapy or she's diagnosed with depression. Some parents still have the belief that, oh, you shouldn't tell the person you might be marrying because it will limit your chances and it will make you, look not marriage material or whatever it is. So there's still so much shame that's ingrained, and that happens in family and social standing. And unfortunately, it affects so many people, and it affects so many people into wanting to go to therapy, because if they go, they're going to get diagnosed, and having that diagnosis is like a stigma upon them. Again, that's more the traditional view. In a lot of different communities here, that has changed, but it's still existent. All right, MCO. Has anyone ever heard of MCO or multicultural orientation in therapy? Maybe, yeah, okay. All right, so MCO is, or multicultural orientation, it is an alternative or supplemental approach to multicultural competency. It's basically like a bit of a step up. And it focuses on ways of being or interpersonal, I can't define it, but heard of it. All right, thank you, Heather. It focuses on ways of being or interpersonal senses that a therapist can demonstrate when working with a client. It basically includes three main aspects. The first one is cultural humility. The second one is cultural comfort. And the third one is the ability to appropriately elicit cultural themes. So basically, cultural humility is the ability to maintain an interpersonal stance that is other-oriented in relation to aspects of cultural identity that are most important to the client. Cultural comfort is just being able to appropriately elicit those cultural themes in sessions and being comfortable with the client exploring their identities and experiences in a positive therapeutic environment. I feel like with cultural comfort, especially, this happens a lot, whether with Muslim clients or for me with clients who belong to different sort of backgrounds. It's that as a therapist, if I don't know a lot about a culture, I'm going to be afraid to explore it, even though it is a very important aspect of their identity. So it's important to build up that cultural comfort. The third one is to actually appropriately elicit some cultural themes. So what happened with MCO is there was this really cool study, and the study was about how do you relate microaggressions in therapy to the degree of a therapist's multicultural orientation. And the results, unfortunately, were that, not unfortunately, but as people were able to see the microaggressions more, then they had higher degrees of cultural humility. As people were not able to see the microaggressions or recognize them, they had lower cultural humility. And I want you to remember that because we're actually going to do a little activity that relates to this study. All right, microaggressions in therapy. We all know about microaggressions, but have we ever kind of tried to think about it in terms of microaggressions towards Muslim clients? Anyone has any ideas of what a microaggression toward a Muslim client might look like? Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
This is a guess, so, but maybe something like someone expressing surprise that someone's that a female person identifies as Muslim if they aren't not wearing hijab or not covering.
Yeah, so it's like, oh wow, you're Muslim. I didn't know that just because you have your hair out or whatever it is.
Yeah,
which is actually really important you say, because it does happen a lot. And so many Muslim identities exist that do not look like me. And it's so important to acknowledge that. Asking the client to justify their religious choice, for example, if they're eating meat in the session. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Thank you. So just a quick brief on microaggressions in general. Microaggressions are a type of cultural bias that are ambiguous or subtle. 53% of BIPOC clients have reported a microaggression in therapy, while only 24% actually were able to discuss it with the therapist, which shows how many microaggressions happen in the therapeutic space without them being discussed. So it's not just that it happened, it was also that the therapist either did not acknowledge or did not understand it was a microaggression, or did not feel the need to address it with a client, and therefore made the client less comfortable. So according to, I think it was Sue in 2007, there were 3 classifications of microaggressions. And I want you to remember those because we are going to do an activity about them. So the first one is micro-invalidations, which is invalidating or undermining the experiences of a marginalized group. For example, a white person telling a Black person, oh, racism doesn't actually exist in today's society. So you're micro-invalidating their experience. Micro assaults are a person intentionally behaving in a way that is discriminatory while not intending to be offensive. So for example, telling a racist joke and then saying, oh yeah, I was just joking, you know. Third one is micro insults, which is to comment or action unintentionally that is discriminatory. For example, your people must be so proud. I think one thing I always get is, oh wow, your English is so good. Like, how can your English be so good and you're Muslim? What is happening? So that is something that I get myself. All right, so for this activity, I'm gonna need one volunteer to read a script with me, and I'm gonna explain what we're gonna do. So who is ready to just read a script, and I'll send it to you in the chat box privately?
I can do it if nobody else is interested, but I know I've talked a lot already, so I'm
That's
happy.
okay. Actually, we can take both Grace and Heather, and then I'm not gonna read something. So one of you will be the therapist and one of you will be the client. All right? Who would like to be who?
I can.
All right. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, I can be a client. Is that what you were
Right.
asking?
Yeah, perfect. So Grace, client, Heather, therapist. I will send you individually in the chat box a script, and then I will explain to the rest of the group what we're gonna do. All right?
Okay.
Let me send it real quick.
Hopefully I will technologically be able to handle it.
I am sure you will be great. All right, so, oh, sorry, I didn't copy. It is not copying for some reason. That is really weird. I'm sorry, give me one more second. I'll try it one more time. That is, all right. Let's see if I can see. It is not sending. That is, okay. How about this? I will stop. So Salome, it's not allowing me to send in the chat box. You know how to, I'm not sure what's happening, but it's not allowing me to send in the chat box.
Did you want to, is there a way for you to email it to me and then I can paste it? Or did you want to just share your screen? What would be best?
I will share it with you over email.
Okay, I'll check email right now. Thank you.
Sorry about that, everyone.
And while you wait, you are more than welcome to complete the sign in, sign out form and copy the evaluation link to your browser so that after the presentation, you are welcome to complete the evaluation form and receive CEUs.
So
Sorry, I just had to throw in a plug.
Okay, I just sent it to you, and while we get that figured out, I'm going to explain what happened. So just as the study in multicultural orientation where they saw about microaggressions, there was a similar study that we worked on, which was about the ability of therapists, mostly graduate students, to detect microaggressions in therapy towards a Muslim client. So what happened? Oh, perfect. So I sent it.
I pasted microaggression 1. Is that okay?
Yes, and then can we do number 2? But I'll ask people to actually not look at it. Yes, please. I'll ask people to not look at it other than Heather and Grace, if that's okay, so that they can read it out. So the study, what happened is that there was an audio recording of a therapy session, and this is a small excerpt from it. I took permission from the rest of the authors. And basically it was a male client and a female therapist, and they were talking. And then the people who were participating were given this computer program, and they were asked to just type the space bar if they hear something that sounds not okay. So if they hit X on the space bar, then that means that there was a microaggression. If they don't, then that means they didn't detect it. And then all the results were compared to whether or not people were actually able to identify the microaggression with the level of the therapist's cultural humility. So we're going to do a bit of it right now. Grace, Heather, whenever you're ready, I'll ask you to read out the script, and then everyone else in the chat box, write down if you feel like you were able to identify microaggressions. So did something sound off to you, or was it a completely perfect therapy experience? And then you can write down if you think it could be a micro invalidation, a micro insult, whatever it is. All right. Any questions before we begin?
I think in part my depression has to do with my being the only Muslim in my office. Like I feel so on edge. Sorry, chat moved. Just what happened? Okay. Like I feel so on edge with my colleagues, especially now that there's so much religious tension socially and in politics. It wears on me all the time. I'm on my own, and people can be so awkward whenever something religion related happens in the news. It's exhausting trying to make it all come together and being by myself.
I'm sorry you feel this way. It sounds exhausting to constantly be feeling judged and rejected by your colleagues. You know, based on what you shared with me today and in previous sessions, it seems like a lot of what you could be what you are dealing with could be interpreted as a sign of depression. One of the symptoms of depression is feeling socially rejected, isolated, and judged. You may be a bit more sensitive to other people's reactions to you because you're struggling with depression. Does that seem right to you? I'm not really sure if you being Muslim has anything to do with it. A lot of people experiencing depression like you are feel lonely and isolated. Don't be so hard on yourself.
All right, thank you for reading. So let's kind of decompress from number one, micro-invalidation. All right. I'm not sure if being Muslim has anything to do with it. Another micro-invalidation, perfect. You guys are really good. A lot of people actually didn't get it in the research, so it means you're a bit more multiculturally competent. What were your reactions? Also, Heather and Grace, feel free to pitch in. What were your reactions as you're reading this and as you're kind of imagining that you're either the client or the therapist?
Client was just really feeling the invalidation piece of how, even if she hadn't said, I don't know if it has anything to do with being Muslim, just the like diverting and going away from it and not even talking and validating the experience of the isolation and the microaggressions all the time from others.
That's perfect, thank you. Bill, I think you had something to say.
Pretty similar to what was just said. I felt like the therapist wanted to hear and change the direction of the agenda to the therapist's theory that this is depression rather than a cultural issue.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So it's not that you're having issues. It's not that there's a lot of cultural implications to it, but it's that you have depression. A lot of people talk in the chat box of, if I'm the client, I might feel like I'm making it up, gaslit, angry, miss an opportunity to connect. So a lot of really cool thoughts everyone's having. Heather and Grace, did you receive the second one in the chat box?
I just sent it to Grace, and Heather's, it's broken up differently, so I apologize for that.
Microaggression 2, is that where it starts?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Client.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm exhausted most days and don't really feel like I have the energy to tackle more than what I'm doing. During the interview, my boss spoke about the workshop, the workspace being really inclusive and a place where everyone can contribute. But you can see from his actions that he plays favorites. Like even in London, he's always sits with the same two guys. I don't want to impose and join them. In meetings, he's always emphasizing everybody being treated the same, but I kind of feel like he wants everyone the same, which makes me feel invisible.
Wow, that's really helpful. I'm having a reaction as you say the word invisible. You really want your boss to see you for you.
And then I'm not sure if you got that part, but then the client goes, yeah, that's it. I really do. Do you have the remaining part? Okay, I think I can hear myself, but I'm going to read the therapist part just to wrap up this piece. The therapist says,
I can read it. Sorry, I didn't hear Grace's part. I'm having a little trouble with audio, I think. I wonder what it would be like for you to just be your personal self and leave your religious customs at home so that you can fit in with folks at work and learn the company's social norms. Could you see yourself doing this, ready to join?
All right, thank you for reading that. Any issues with the script or not really? So the therapist says, I wonder what it would be like for you to just be your personal self and leave your religious customs at home so that you can fit in with other folks at work. How are we reacting to this? So I'm not hearing what the client is saying. Yeah. Microsoft. Yeah, so it's a lot of what happened. The first one, micro insults and identity and validating. Don't be yourself.
I mean, it's making an assumption that and bringing their religion to work is not them being themselves, like it's somehow not a part of them, and that seems just crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing. And another piece of it is the idea of pathologizing the Muslim religion, the idea that there's something wrong with your religion for you to not be able to do that, so you should just leave it at home. There was also a similar example where someone was speaking, so a lot of practicing Muslims don't drink alcohol. So a client was speaking about, I feel very left out when my coworkers go for happy hour and it's so rough to kind of get to know them. And the therapist kind of completely also invalidated that and was like, well, how about we just try to go see how it is and try to blend in, or you're an American now, or whatever it is. And as absurd as it sounds, it actually does happen in therapy sessions. So even though we're hearing this and we're like, wow, the therapist completely invalidated the client, it actually does happen in a lot of therapy sessions, and it's important we acknowledge that. So feel free to continue writing kind of your reactions to this in the chat box. And just a quick recap. So the microaggression 1 was the therapist's dismissal or minimization of the client's identity. And microaggression 2 was pathology of the Muslim religion. And actually, a lot of people didn't catch the microaggression 2 in the study, which shows how we need to do better. But if anyone has any other reactions, thank you, Grace and Heather, for being our client and therapist. We really appreciate that. Micro insult forcing assimilation is a really good one as well. All right, so just some closing comments and discussions. I really want to be able to open up the space for at least 10 minutes for any questions. I know someone asked about Ramadan, and we'll get to that. But some closing comments that I would like to give. Context always plays a huge role. So just as I introduced to you earlier, what the experience of American Muslims is like, it's important to put that in your mind when you are with American Muslims. Consider how much they have faced. Consider what kind of things they have to go through on a daily basis when you're providing treatment. The second thing is acknowledging that psychology is a very historically Western practice. One thing I really appreciate is the idea of decolonial psychology, and we won't have enough time to bring that in today, but I think it goes hand in hand. And it's really important to understand how that plays a role and plays a part in the therapy room. For example, a lot of quote unquote psychology practices denounce a lot of non-Western religious practices. And so it would make sense for a lot of people who are religious to kind of have a negative view of psychology due to that history and due to that invalidation. So keep that in your mind when you're seeing people. But also consider what you bring to the therapy room. What are your different identities and how do those intersect with that of the client? For example, what if you're having a client who comes from a country that was actually invaded by the US? So you have a client, and to them, you represent the person, or you represent the people who actually made their country unlivable anymore and who made them come here. How does that impact them? How are they going to think about it, and what are they going to see? So think about your place. Are we colonizers? What are we? And that is something that I've had to grapple with as I'm seeing clients, as we're thinking about different target group identities. So just think about them. Who are you to them, and what do you represent? Because while they might not say it or even be aware of it, this could create a wall between you. And it's important to acknowledge it. And the second thing is, don't be afraid to bring up religion and culture. Be like, I want to learn more about this, and I want to take the steps to make sure that I'm serving you in the best way I can. And that needs to be by you telling me how I can help. Which brings us to the point of maintaining the client's autonomy. What do they want to discuss? What are they not comfortable with? It's important to get a balance of eliciting cultural themes, but not pushing it too much. There is the idea that a lot of therapists who are dealing with clients from diverse backgrounds will try to stress too much that it's coming maybe from parents who are very strict, or be like, yeah, this is because you're coming from that culture and that's what you need to address. Whereas the client doesn't really want to address that. So meet the client where they are and kind of see them there. The last thing is that there is no one right way to be Muslim, even though a lot of people are very self-righteous towards it and be like, this is the only way I have to look Muslim. But actually the community is so diverse. And there's often so many different intersecting identities that are important to explore. For example, what happens when the identity of being in the LGBT community intersects with being Muslim? How does that look like? And there's actually a big growing community, especially in the United States. And that's something that's important to explore. Another thing is cultural background. A Muslim who's South Asian has very different experiences from a Muslim who is white passing an Arab. So one thing that Arabs have a lot of privilege in is that a lot of us are white passing. And for example, if I don't wear the scarf or if I don't wear the hijab, not me, but other people, they can walk around in the United States and not be identified. So how does that feel versus someone who is very easily identifiable? So these are some closing comments, discussion that I just wanted to talk about. And then I just want to open up the floor for questions, feedback, further discussion. I really like this to be a very dynamic presentation. So what kind of questions do we have? Karen, you're asking slides. I think they will be. I'll have them email you the slides. Thank you. Sorry, Billy has something.
This has been a wonderful presentation. I wonder if you have a couple of authors or books that you could recommend to, you know.
What would you like the books to be addressed at? So is it about counseling Muslims? Is it about learning more about the diversity? What would you like the books to be like?
More about learning about Muslim.
Okay. I will have a list and send it and have them email them to you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you so much. And then we had I think the question was in the beginning was about for people observing Ramadan. I'm just trying to get it. Can you discuss whether and how to acknowledge Ramadan? So as I discussed in the beginning, if someone wasn't there, it's currently the month of Ramadan. All you can do to your coworkers is, or people you work with, family members, people you know, acknowledge. A lot of people like to say Ramadan Mubarak, which just means like happy Ramadan in Arabic. But also acknowledge that they're going to be having very different sleep schedules and that it's okay. You might find them waking up at like 12 p.m. I personally woke up at 11 today, and that's fine, but acknowledge that, but also share them with it. Ramadan is also a month of community. So if they're friends, you can invite them for iftar at your house, which is basically a late dinner. So where they break the fast, have them embrace that and have them know that you are embracing that. I'm not sure if that was helpful, but I hope it was. But yeah, what other questions do we have? Thank you, Helen.
I have a question. You talked about the LGBT community.
I'm sorry,
are there...
I can't hear you. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure if it's me, but it's very shaky. Can you try again?
Hear me?
I'm so sorry. Okay, I'll wait for it in the chat box. Perfect. I'll wait for it in the chat box. Michelle, any recommendations for people on Medicaid for accessing cultural sensitive mental health providers through our community mental health agency? Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of that. It's very difficult to find. I know, for example, if you're looking for someone who's a Muslim therapist, it's so rare to find. But if you're looking for someone who has just culturally sensitive mental health, it's also rare to find, which is so hard. I will look into resources, but I'm not sure there's a lot of them. So sorry, Michelle. But it is really limited. Particular considerations when it comes to talking about planning around end of life. So with with that, usually in the Muslim faith, a lot of people like to discuss the idea of the afterlife. So especially with folks who are in hospice and who are kind of preparing for that, a lot of them try to remember the good deeds, the good things they've done, and then reflect on it. I think all you could do is just allow them to talk and to speak about their experiences, and to see them where they are. For example, a lot of people in hospice, they either get really, really closer to their faith and they want to work on it, or people are like, I don't want to do that right now. So don't just assume because they're Muslim that this is what they want to do. Meet them where they are and see from there. New to the area, not that I know of. Usually with the LGBTQ Muslim communities, because I think all or most of Muslim countries, so Muslim majority countries, it is really, really, really hard to exist as someone who has that identity. So it's usually a bit more secretive. But if I do get to know, I will let you know. I know there is, I'll try to research and send that to you, but that's really interesting because it's so important. But they're usually more hidden identities and people wouldn't disclose them until their comfort level with the therapist goes to that safety, because of fear of persecution, etc. But they do exist and there's a lot of them. So Heather and then Nia. Sorry, I hope I'm saying your name correctly.
Have a quick.
Sorry,
sorry. Go ahead.
Nia, you go ahead.
I just had a quick question about grief and in counseling with Muslim clients. I work with a lot of people from Iraq and Afghanistan, and one of the interpreters told me that a common thing with grief culturally is to bury your grief with the dead. And so opening up and talking about it is really not necessarily part of the culture. And yet in a therapy relationship, it's something I've tried to encourage clients to do, but I find that tension hard to navigate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for trying that. So theoretically or religiously speaking, it is the idea that with grief, once the person passes away, you leave them where they're buried and all you can do is pray for them. And so that is the religious aspect. It doesn't say you're not supposed to talk about them, but when that is combined with culture and people, kind of have that, oh, you should get over it, or, oh, you're not supposed to talk about it, combined with the idea that we don't really have a lot of talk about feelings. Growing up in a lot of different communities, there is no, let's talk about our feelings, let's explore that, and let's allow ourselves. So it is going to be a process for you, but I really like that you're doing that. So give it its time, but don't push the client too much, but let them know that it's okay and they're allowed to have a process of grief that might look longer than that of their family members, because there's a lot of guilt into it as well of why am I not getting over this? My other family members are. And the last thing is tell them that they can coexist. You can keep praying for the person. If there's someone who's religious, you can keep praying for them, doing all the religious.
I'll send you any questions they have.
Oh, okay, sorry. Praying for them and being religious doesn't mean that you're not supposed to talk about it, and doesn't mean that you cannot talk about them. And both of these can exist together, which is something that a lot of people don't understand as they're growing up. So just normalizing it a bit more. I hope that was helpful. Thank you. All right, Heather.
I'm having a little trouble with my audio, so sorry.
Okay. Would you like to send it over the chat box?
Okay, I clicked on the link and it started playing. The link that was sent, it started playing. I couldn't find the pause button. I'm wondering if you have particular easy recommendations around making your therapeutic space or your interactions consciously more inviting or more welcoming. That may be a really big question, but
I get that. So we can't say I have some recommendations. Are they going to be enough? I'm not sure, but these are what I would do with clients who are from different backgrounds than mine. One thing is I would do my own research. For example, as I started working with trans teens, this is something that I needed to do a lot of research on to make sure that I am competent. So for the same thing for you, do research on the basic pillars, understand where they're coming from, but also understand the cultural aspect. So what is their background? Are they immigrants? Are they first generation? What are they, refugees? Because based on where they're from, it could differ so much. The second thing is actually acknowledge those differences in the therapy room. Based on some research I was doing with refugees seeking mental health care from my professionals, it's the idea that they're kind of dancing around it. So it's like the elephant in the room, they're not talking about it, and the client is not going to bring it up. So actually, you bring it up. Be like, I'm recognizing that we're having those differences in identities, and I want to make sure that you're comfortable. What can I do for you to make sure you're comfortable? And let them know that you can talk to them about different religious or cultural things if they would like to. So give them that invitation and kind of extend it. And from there, they're going to be more kind of willing to do it. But just show them that you want to meet them, if that makes sense. Yeah, okay. All right. What other questions do we have? I'm not sure I'm helpful, but I hope I have. But, any other questions? There's also my email. Feel free to contact me. But I think we have a couple minutes or a minute or two before we need to end. So the floor is open. Thank you, I appreciate it. Marion, I think the certificate was just sent in the chat box. Thank you. All right, well, I hope everyone learned something today. Please feel free to reach out. I think we'll have the slides ready. I just need to work on including the references because I didn't have time to do that. But it was pretty cool to see everyone today, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll hang on for a few minutes just for any questions.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to post in the chat box again the links just in case you need them. And just providing a gentle reminder that we have 2 upcoming events: what is involved in being a multicultural competent therapist and how to start a private practice. And we also, coming up in June, we'll have our ethics conference as well. So we look forward to seeing everyone at the upcoming events. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to be there and provide support. I love you, little one. Sorry, that's my toddler trying to write to everyone right now in the chat box.
I love her presence in the trainings, I gotta say.
She brings me a lot of joy.
And someone did ask about the videos. They're embedded in the presentation, so you're gonna find them once we send out the presentation. I forgot to answer that. Bill, go ahead.
So are the certificates, where are they? They're
That's up to
Yeah, when everyone completes their evaluation form and sign in, sign out form, then our executive administrator goes through and sends people the certificate. So it'll be coming in about a week or two. She's currently on vacation.